Hello, everyone. Welcome to Session 6, Building Reading Comprehension Through Writing Summaries of our Middle School and High School Literacy Teacher to Professional Development Series. My name is Natalie Kleber, and I am the Middle School and High School Literacy PD Specialist here at the Louisiana Department of Education. Okay, so in our last session, we spent time defining reading comprehension and why it's a complex process. We described the skills that make up reading comprehension and what is required to be an effective comprehender of text. We said that we need to do those things in order to help support anybody who needs more support in reading comprehension. Today's objective is that by the end of the session, you will be able to apply the process of writing summaries in the classroom to support reading comprehension. I'm going to model a strategy for you, and then you're going to be able to apply it in your classroom. In the last session, we defined text comprehension is a dynamic and interactive process involving several sources of information and knowledge. We said that reading comprehension is very complex and that there are so many different things happening simultaneously in our brains that it's important for us to acknowledge that so that we can meet all the different needs that are happening. Successful comprehension of written text enables the reader to acquire and apply new knowledge, to experience other fictional worlds, to communicate successfully, and to attain academic success. And this was a quote by Kate Kane, who's an expert in reading comprehension. And it just speaks to how important reading comprehension is, not just in school, but as a lifelong practice. Here is Scarbo's reading rope. And ultimately, all of the upper and lower strands play a huge part in somebody's ability to read and comprehend. However, in middle and high school, we assume that if they have that lower strand, if they have phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition skills, then we can work on that upper strand and develop those components to help aid reading comprehension. So the upper strand is language comprehension, which comprises much more than just reading comprehension. It's listening comprehension. But if we work on developing background knowledge, we can help improve reading comprehension. If we develop vocabulary knowledge, we can build people's reading comprehension. If we work on language structures, syntax, and semantics, and how sentences are composed and paragraphs are composed, we can help build reading comprehension. And the same thing with verbal reasoning and literacy knowledge. If we build understanding of these different components of the strands, then we're able to help improve reading comprehension. So we talked about characteristics of good reading comprehenders. We said they're able to integrate information from sentence to sentence and from paragraph to paragraph. They're able to combine that knowledge and make meaning of it across the text. We said that they're able to make inferences from the text and determine what the author is actually trying to say, not just what the words say. We said that good comprehenders monitor their own comprehension. Subconsciously, we're making these questions in our minds and answering them as we continue to read. They have knowledge and use of text structure. They understand, like we're talking about, those different types of sentences, different genres, the purpose for different writings, and they have good memory. They have short-term and long-term memory that they're able to access, and as they read, they can store that in different components of their memory. We said that building strong comprehenders, these are different things that we can do for them. Today, our focus is summarizing what has been read, and there's 2 sessions coming after this. They're going to focus on other strategies we can use in order to support reading comprehension. But just to reiterate, there's no one magical strategy to improve reading comprehension because it is so complex. I had stated in the first session, I wanted you to focus on where you think your students need the most support. So for instance, if they're proficient at writing summaries, that's not something you have to do. Or if they have a great vocabulary depth and knowledge, that's not something you have to do. But look at the other parts of the strand to determine what strategy you may be able to use. So here are some steps. Before we even pull the strategy out, we need to talk about how do we even prep the class, the materials, what has to happen before we use the strategy. You want to select carefully the text to use when first beginning to teach a given strategy. You don't want the cognitive load of the text to be so heavy. They're trying to determine what the words even say while applying the strategy for the first time. So You might want to pick something. If the class that you're teaching is on level with the text that you're already teaching, then use that. But if they're not and they're a little bit lower, consider something on the same topic so you're also building background knowledge at the same time as teaching the strategy. Show students how to apply the strategies they are learning to different texts, not just one text. So for instance, in English language arts, there are going to be times where students read literary text, informational text. In science, there are going to be times that they're reading science journals, lab reports. In social studies, they have primary source documents, secondary source documents. Help them to understand that this strategy, we're not learning the strategy to learn the strategy. We're learning the strategy to help us read and comprehend all different types of texts. We have to be very transparent about that and explicit, because if we tell students that, they're able to store it a certain way in their mind. They file it in their head as saying, okay, this applies to everything and this is why. And they're able to access that again, playing on that memory piece too. Ensure that the text is appropriate for the reading level of the students. We talked about that. Use direct and explicit instruction for teaching students how to use comprehension strategies. So I have some more information on what direct and explicit instruction involves, but I'm also going to show you a model for you what direct and explicit instruction looks like as well. Provide the appropriate amount of guided practice depending on the difficulty level of the strategies that the students are learning. So in a second, we're going to focus on a strategy called the 12 words. And this might be something we're going to pick 12 words, we're going to categorize them, and then we're going to write a summary from that. This is something that might need a few practices. So it might be one model. It might be a few we do guided practice together. And then you might do I do a model, a we do, and you might notice that you're still providing way too much support and you have to pull it back to an I do. But you're going to use your students as a guide to determine how fast you should progress through the process of that. When teaching comprehension strategies, make sure students understand the goal is to understand the content of the text. It's not just to understand the actual strategy, because pretty soon I explain to my students, the strategy is not so you know the strategy. Eventually what's going to happen with the strategy is it becomes part of your thinking and you no longer need the strategy because it's happening automatically in your brains. So, and you'll start to see as your students become more proficient and fluent with the strategy, you can take it away and they're going to be doing that in their heads on their own. So I told you we would talk more about direct and explicit instruction. You need to start out by informing the students of what strategy they're going to learn. You're going to tell them this is the strategy that we're learning and why it's important to learn it. It's really important that they know what they should get out of it so they know when they've achieved that goal. And also, like I said, to help them file that in their brains for information for when to pull that up. The most important thing about direct and explicit instruction is to model the use of the strategy with the think aloud while interacting with the text. It's really important that the students see the text. They almost see your thinking through the words that you're using. And if you have to even make some notes on the text, if you're using an Elmo or a Promethean board, it's important that they see your thinking so they can duplicate that same thinking later when it's their turn to independently use the strategy. You want to provide guided practice with feedback. And feedback initially is going to be very targeted on the parts of the strategy that could be lifted or done more efficiently. And eventually the feedback might just shift to, the level of proficiency. You did a great job at doing this part of the strategy. But students need to really explicitly understand what they're doing well, what they still need to improve on, and what the difference it's making. And then you're going to provide independent practice with different types of texts with the strategy. So that becomes fluid. They know when to use it, how to use it, and it becomes, like I said, part of their thinking. So here are some different summary writing strategies. These are quite a few. I'm just going to model for you the 12-word trick today, but there's other ones that you can use. There's SWBST, and this one is an acronym for somebody wanted, but so then. So you're going to read the text. You're going to say who the somebody was, who was involved in the text. What did they want? But this happened, and this flows better, I find, for either a cause and effect or narrative. So this happened, and then this will lead to something. It fits better with those types of genres. Also, I find that you can use this in upper as well, but I find this fits better in the lower end of middle school. The 5 W's and the 1 H fits great no matter what the text type is and no matter what the grade band is in 6 through 12. So this is what, when, where, why, who, and how. It's a very basic strategy. You know, they just need to pick out the most important things that are happening there. The only thing that I lean towards things like gist or 12-word trick is it's much more explicit and you see the thinking much better and writing an explicit summary at the end. But this is a great jumping off point too if they have no experience with writing summaries. Then you have first, then, and finally. And again, this one works best for different types of text. This one is going to work best, of course, for a sequence type of text or again, a narrative. Helps determine a sequence of events by what happened and who was involved first, what happened in the middle, and what happened at the end of the text. Then there is a strategy called the gist. It can be done where you allot the students a certain amount of words. So you could do it, okay, read the passage or read the paragraph, pick out 12 words, or a certain amount of time to get the most important ideas expressed. It's really up to you and how you implement it. I've always done it with the amount of words that they can pull. Sometimes when we get students a text, a written text, and we ask them to highlight, a lot of times it'll look like a coloring sheet, like the whole thing is colored in. And if we don't limit the amount of words that they can pull, they struggle with that. So when we tell them they can only have 12 words, they're asking themselves, they're monitoring their comprehension. They're saying, do I know this is important? How do I know this is important? And it really helps them tighten up on the most important aspects of the text. The one that I'm modeling today for you is the 12-word trick. You're going to pull 12 of the most essential words from the passage. You're going to categorize them, and you're going to use those words to write a 2 to 3 sentence summary. So let's see what that looks like. So when we're doing the 12-word trick, the first thing we do is determine if you're writing a summary for a literary text or a nonfiction text. And you're going to provide students with this chart with the key details of both types of text. So tell them if we're looking at a literary text, first of all, how do we know it's literary? Okay, we're reading a literary text. We need character names in the 12 words. We need setting details. We need descriptive words, words that describe the problem, words about important events, and the theme or the meaning should probably be included in our 12 words. If we're looking at a nonfiction text, we're looking for the topic, define terms, important ideas, process steps, if there's a step or process that's being followed, any facts or numbers that relate to the topic, and repeated terms and ideas often help us determine what the topic is. So let's look at that. So first you're going to read the passage to them, or you can read it as a class. Select the 12 words based on the clues in the table for the type of text you're looking for. And then in a second, we're going to be focusing on that nonfiction text. So we're going to be looking for those things. It is essential to model why you chose the word you did when doing the think aloud for your students. You're going to see that in a second. Then you're going to sort the words by category. And the purpose of the categories is just to help group words by idea bands when constructing sentences. And so if you have students who want to include all 12 words in one sentence, this helps keep it concise to different, and it also helps with syntax. It helps them understand that one sentence is one complete idea. So that's the purpose behind the categories. Then you're going to construct 2 to 3 sentences using the 12 words that summarize the text. So I'm going to model it. I'm going to include my think aloud, why I chose the words. And we're going to start off with one paragraph or a smaller piece of text, and then you can move into something a little bit bigger. I am going to use a gradual release model, but with taping this and not having live people, we won't have the we do, but I'll have the I do, and then I'll show you how we move into the we do if we had students. You're going to monitor, like I said earlier, the proficiency of the class as I do this. And if the majority of the class is proficient with that first we do, move them to an independent level. If not, like I said, either consider bringing it all the way back to a model, or maybe they just needed a little bit more reinforcement, and you just do it one more time as a whole group. All right, so here's the passage. Here's the paragraph that we're going to be doing. This comes from Teaching Reading is Rocket Science. So I'm going to go ahead and read it to my students first. So a rich and meaningful curriculum in which students are exposed to a variety of texts as they learn concepts in science, literature, social studies, history, the arts, and culture should provide the context for developing reading and writing skills. Comprehension strategies should not be taught in isolation, but used as necessary to enhance understanding of text assigned for content learning. Useful comprehension strategies to embed in content reading include prediction of outcomes, summarizing, clarification, questioning, and visualization. These can be modeled explicitly by the teacher and practiced overtly if students are not comprehending well or if they approach reading comprehension passively. Vocabulary is best taught with a variety of complementary methods, both direct and incidental, designed to explore the relationships among words and the relationships among word structure, origin, and meaning. Of course, children also benefit from access to full libraries and incentives to read independently. So after I have read the text first for the whole, fully through the whole time, I'm going to go back and model my thinking now for why I'm choosing the words that I'm choosing. And it's important, I think, for the students to have the chart, but if not, at least go back to the chart and say, okay, just remember, we're looking for the topic, defined terms, important ideas, processes or steps, facts and numbers, or repeated terms and ideas. So coming back here, in the first sentence, I noticed that it all focuses on the types of texts and the curriculum, the idea of having a curriculum. So I'm definitely going to pick curriculum as one of my words because they're talking about curriculum in all these different areas. And it says a variety of texts. That's really important in that first one. And I noticed that the whole entire paragraph focuses on developing those reading and writing skills. So I'm going to pick curriculum, variety text, developing reading and writing skills. The next sentence says comprehension strategies should not be taught in isolation, but used as necessary to enhance understanding of text assigned for content learning. One word that's definitely repeated several times throughout, or two really, is comprehension and strategies. So I'm definitely going to choose those as some of my most important words. So again, in this third sentence, comprehension strategies comes through again. So I know that those definitely need to be one of my 12 words. So comprehension strategies to embed in content reading include, and then there's a whole bunch of different types of examples. I'm going to choose, I've already chose comprehension strategy, so I don't need to choose that again, but I'm going to choose embed because it's embedded in all those different types of strategies. I can't name all the types of strategies or use all my 12 words, but it needs to be embedded in those. And modeled explicitly. I'm going to choose modeled explicitly because if I took that out and we just had them, it says practiced overtly. So I feel like modeled explicitly speaks to how serious it needs to be and not just practiced or done once. Then it starts speaking about vocabulary. Vocabulary is best taught with a variety, and again, we have that variety word again, of complementary methods, both direct and incidental, designed to explore the relationships among words and the relationships among word structure. So relationships is another word that's repeated. Vocabulary speaks to everything we're reading about there. So vocabulary is going to be one of my words, and relationships. And then the last thing is it says that children benefit also from full libraries and incentives to read independently. So I'm going to have read independently as some of my words too. If I was in the classroom and I had a Promethean board or an Elmo, I would want to be highlighting them as I go. So this is what I would look like as I'm going through it. I would model and highlight or underline, whatever you choose, as I go through the passage. Okay, so these are my 12 words that I picked. And I'm counting some of them as one word, like comprehension strategies, because it speaks to the type of strategy that it is. Students are going to have questions about that. So we need to explicitly explain that. We also are going to have instances where students would pick words that we didn't pick. That's a great time to talk about the fact that theirs could be correct too, but we need to ask ourselves those questions. Remember, part of successful comprehenders use those internal questions to ask ourselves. So a question I might ask, say my student chose full libraries as one of their terms, or libraries. I would say, okay, if you took libraries out of that sentence, would you understand what the sentence was about? Do you think it's a main idea in that sentence or in the paragraph? And if they say yes, and they have a reason behind it, then we let them keep it. What we're hoping is as we keep asking those guided questions, they start to ask themselves those questions when they determine what words to choose and what words not to choose. Okay, so jumping back into my teacher hat, these are the 12 words that I chose. And I saw this at a literacy conference called Plain Talk. And she takes loose leaf paper when she teaches this, and she folds it in 3 lengthwise, then in 3 widthwise, and it forms those little pockets, 9 little pockets of paper for you to write on, which makes it just so easy to implement. But in the top 3 box, I copied down my words that I highlighted. So remember, I had curriculum, variety, text, developing reading, writing skills, comprehension strategies, embed, modeled explicitly, vocabulary, relationships, and read independently. And I think it's important here too, as like I said, some of these are 2 words instead of 1, and you have very literal learners sometimes, and you need to explain to them. If you have an adjective or adverb that is very explicit, like if I just said modeled, and I didn't say modeled explicitly, how would that impact it? How would my understanding of how somebody modeled change? And when we can say that it really defines what the term is beside it, then sometimes we can keep that adjective or adverb beside. If students are trying to put 3 and 4 words there, that's when we have to go back and fine tune and say, okay, what's most essential in that phrase? So that's just another little disclaimer. Now that I have my 12 words, I'm going to break them down by category. And when I'm asking myself what goes into each category, I might group them by a who or what or why or a how. It doesn't have to be. So I'm going to start out by saying I grouped curriculum, variety, text, and embed together because it's what we're using and where it should be. So I'm using my curriculum. I said it should be a variety of texts and it should be embedded throughout these curricula, throughout these texts. The next group of words that I put together was comprehension strategies, vocabulary, relationships, and independently. And I choose those because those were all ways that we could improve reading comprehension. So I'll group those together. The last grouping I have is modeled explicitly, develop reading and writing skills. And that's kind of my how and what's going to be impacted. Again, students are going to have different categories. As long as they can tell you why they're in that category, then it's perfectly fine. If they can't define why it's in the category, ask them some guiding questions to help them get them into a category. Because now my sentences come from those categories and those idea bubbles. So my first sentence, I'm using those first grouping of words. A curriculum with a variety of texts and embedded strategies are needed to support and develop strategic readers. Here's my next grouping. Comprehension strategies, vocabulary development that focuses on relationships between words and independent reading are used to support reading development. Last grouping of words. The strategies need to be modeled explicitly in order to develop reading and writing skills. So that's kind of how it all flows together. So now that I have modeled it for my class and I did some step outs where I'm explaining it, don't take the time to explain that in the middle. Go through, really model, ask them to write down their questions if they have questions as they're going. If it's something that they think is so important they can't move on, then have them share their question out. But otherwise, try to get through the model so they can understand fully. Then if you want to label the learning after, you can. But it's really important that you have to think aloud and at least interruptions as possible so that you can get through it. Okay. Then we're going to go into a piece of text, maybe the next paragraph in the passage, and we're going to do it together as a we do. We're going to read it together as a class. I'm going to choose either pre-identify who you're going to call on or take volunteers. Just be careful about that because you want to make sure you gauge the understanding of the whole class and not just the same 1 or 2 students, and ask for what the 12 words are. And those are some great times to have those discussions about who chose what words and why they're essential or important. Then you add your 12 words, let them do a little turn and talk maybe to put those words, either pull the words initially or definitely the category piece is a much higher level of learning. So if they want to do a little turn and talk and say, hey, what group of words would you put together and why? And let them do that and then share out. And then as a class, a turn and talk again or independent time and then share out of what the 2 to 3 sentence summary should look like. If you notice that you're not offering a ton of feedback and they're kind of flowing through it, they might be ready to move to independent practice after that. If you're noticing that you're redirecting a whole lot and they're so lost, pull them back, model another paragraph again, then move to the whole group. If they just need a little bit more clarification, like I said, then just do another whole group or we do. Okay, so some next steps if they're not progressing. If you're teaching the summary strategy and you're pulling another thing with direct and explicit instruction, there are times when you need to do this as a whole class. And then there might be a handful of students who need even more support in learning this strategy. So if you pull students during small group time at any time, even if it's 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning or end of class, they really need, students who need more support need more opportunities to see this over and over again. They need more opportunities to hear your thinking. They need more opportunities to implement it before it takes. So if you're doing that and they're still not progressing even in their small groups, they may need to be referred to the school's administration or SBLC team for next steps. Very little or no progress with the strategy could indicate that students need help with word recognition skills, such as decoding or phonics skills, or even phonemic awareness skills, just understanding, letter sound correspondences. So just some final thoughts. Summarizing is a key strategy to improving reading comprehension. And I think you can see that just by the use of the 12-word strategy that we used. You understand all the different processes that are happening in that strategy. And that's why I love it so much more than even the 5 W's and the H, because if you're able to pull out the most important words and say why they're important, if you're able to categorize those by idea bubbles and then write sentences from them, you're going to definitely be a fantastic comprehender by practicing that a few times, because it has all of the skills in reading comprehension kind of embedded in it. Summarizing can be taught whole class as well as through small groups for those students who need more support. And just to engage in the learning, I want you to think about an upcoming lesson. What text will you use to teach students how to summarize? Remember to consider the level of the text and potentially going down a level before you jump into the on-level text, just to build that background knowledge and practice with a text that's not going to require the same cognitive load. How will this strategy lead to gains outside of just reading comprehension in your classroom? What is learning this strategy going to mean to students, whether they're applying for a job or going to college, and communicate that to the students or ask them, what do you think this is going to do for you? Because especially at the middle and the high level, that helps with their motivation and their buy-in to truly understand and learn the strategy. And as always, if you have any questions or suggestions, contact us at louisianaliteracy@la.gov. I would love to hear any suggestions that you have. We have 2 more sessions left in this series, which are 2 more strategies for reading comprehension development. But we'll have a whole bunch more coming out for Teacher Leader Summit as well. So stay tuned, and I'm so glad that y'all tuned in.